Memorandum on the Case of Laos. Presented by the Movement for Democracy in Laos to the United Nations Organization and International Community of State of Law-Loving Peace, Justice, and Human Dignity. Laos under the domination of Vietnam. For almost 50 years now, Laos has lived under the domination of Vietnam, whose hegemony has reduced this small landlocked country into its western rear province, taxable and exploitable at will. Its independence and neutrality recognized and guaranteed by the July 1962 Geneva Agreements and January 7, 1973 Paris Agreements have been violated with impunity and arrogance as a result of the then currently accepted pessimism and the general belief in the avoidable totalitarian and communist alternative to the liberal democracy. Acting on the strength of the internal February 23, 1973 peace agreement, Vietnam has used its Laos satellite, the Lao People's Revolutionary Party, a Lao version of the Vietnamese Communist Party, to establish, by means of quiet coup d'etat and in all legitimacy, a communist regime in Laos. This aggression against the status of independence and conventional neutrality of Laos has been distortedly misrepresented by Vietnam in order to give it a certain legitimacy and respectability vis-a-vis international community. When on July 18, 1977, it imposed on Laos a treaty called the Vietnam-Lao Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. This agreement valid for 25 years and tacitly renewable for each new decade period, set up the special relations between Laos and Vietnam furthermore. It serves as a legal cover for colonizing and Vietnamizing the Lao people, for exploiting its natural resources, and for annexing important portions of its territory along the Lao-Vietnam border. Furthermore, Vietnam has evoked the then Brennerian doctrine and used it as a pretext to transform Lao into a springboard, furthering its expansion in Southeast Asia. Therefore, Laos become alive and slave or beast of burden conditions. In the human rights viewpoint, the Lao people have only the right to obey and produce according to the party and the communist state's orders. It is interesting to observe that during past 49 years, Laos has been governed by the Lao Communist Party's guidelines, which have the force of law. It is only in August 1991 that the Lao Communist regime has promulgated a constitutional order to give itself vis-a-vis the international community a certain respectability, but a faked one in fact, because this fundamental law was promulgated 4 days before the failed putsch in Moscow, which instead inaugurated the beginning of the collapse of totalitarian communism. In short, the 80 articles of this Stalinist constitution contain purely theoretical dispositions. In particular, its Article 3 was devoted to the prominence and the leading role of Lao People's Revolutionary Party, the Lao Communist Party, vis-a-vis the Lao state, and openly shows the dictatorial and totalitarian nature of the Lao communist leaders, while they present themselves as favorable to the open-door policy and democracy. The present situation in Laos, even with the new economic mechanism and the seemingly liberal reforms, cannot be considered as acquired and irreversible because it is not consistent with the Lao people's legitimate aspirations, their desire to recover their national independence and their freedom.